everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Brilliant Faces with Dr. Saadia Asghar Khan. I'm Dr. Saadia, and today we have joining us Pakistani author Faiqa Mansab. Faiqa is the daughter of the late Rai Mansab Ali Khan, a very well-known politician of Pakistan. She's also the sister of Dr. Shezra Mansab, who's currently serving as an MNA. And I have seen Faiqa ever since she was a little girl in school at the Convent of Jesus in Mary, Lahore. And it's lovely to see her all grown up and doing so well and making a name for herself and for Pakistan. Faiqa is the author of This House of Clay and Water, published by Penguin India in 2017. The book has been translated into Turkish and is available as an audiobook, but it has also been optioned for screen adaptation. The novel was Amazon Editor's Pick, Amazon International Women's Writing, and it was shortlisted for the Getz Farmer Literary Award and the German Consulate Peace Prize in 2018. Her second novel, The Sufi Storyteller, is forthcoming. Faiqa's work has also appeared in English on Lucy's Writers Platform, Cambridge, The Missing Slate London, Medusa London, and in Punjabi, she has written for Brahma Pakistan. Faiqa has an MFA with a high distinction from Kingston University, London. She's also the recipient of the prestigious British Chevening Award. Assalamu alaikum. Kya haal hai, Faiqa?
Walaikum salam. Bilkul theek, Saadia. It's lovely to see you after so many years.
I know, same here. It's lovely to see you. I still remember that little girl in the Convent of Jesus and Mary, right?
And I remember the gorgeous, very fashionable Saadia. We
Oh,
used to admire you so much.
it's lovely to see you. And I remember the three little sisters and Shezra taking care of you guys and, taking you
Yeah,
out in break time. Every break she would do it.
yeah.
And I remember you guys being late for assembly
Yes.
every day,
Later.
right? And
There
your
were eight
mom
of
who
us.
used to drop you, right?
Yes. Because the four cousins and then the four of us.
Hmm.
So, he had his hands
So,
full.
so those are the lovely memories that I have of you. And look at
Yeah.
you all grown up and a published author and, so many accolades and awards and inshallah aur bhi honge. Let's begin. ठीक है? Because we need people to know
Absolutely.
more about you and how cool and wonderful you are and about your upcoming book and also the book that you've written already and everything else you've been doing. So let's start from early childhood and your growing up experiences.
So, my early childhood was in my grandmother's Haveli,
Mm.
which is in Miami. I don't think you ever visited that house.
No.
So, it was, Miami started as a little village,
Hmm.
and later on, it became part of Lahore.
Okay.
So, Miamir, the village, is where, the saint Miamir, his shrine was there. So basically, that's how it became Miamir. And then, as Lahore expanded and it started eating up the adjacent areas, Miamir is then now Upper Mall.
Right.
So
Hmm.
that's the area.
Hmm.
And our Haveli is still there. That's where I grew up. And my grandmother, if you remember, I don't know if
I
you
do. I
if
do
you
remember her. Absolutely. Because whenever
yeah,
we came to visit you guys,
yeah,
then we had to go and visit her first. Like, salam karna hota tha, unka pyar lete the. Of course, I remember her.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you also recall that she would just be sitting with the
Hmm.
Quran Pak in front of her,
Hmm.
and that's how she spent her day. So that's what I've seen.
Okay. Hmm.
She would call me, at night, and she'd say, I'm going to give you a gift. And she would make me learn an ayat. I still remember those. I can, recite those. I think my childhood was not according to the times that I was born in,
Hmm.
but rather more, I think, because it had a very high concentration of my grandmother's influence. So it was probably a more traditional childhood and a more traditional upbringing
Hmm.
than my contemporaries.
Mhm.
So I grew up with, Sufi music, Sufi stories, Sufi poetry,
Okay.
and a lot of, the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the Quran.
Hmm.
So I think in that way, I was very lucky.
Hmm.
because from convent I was getting all the influence from Western education, Western literature. So I was, I think, getting the exposure of all the best things that a child should be exposed to.
Hmm.
So the values, I think, that I grew up with, they have sustained me throughout life. They've served me well. They've
Hmm.
kept me uh, grounded and balanced.
Let's talk a bit about your father, also about your mother. So tell us a bit about your father. And he
My
was
father
representing
was absolutely,
Nankana Sahib, right?
yes,
Yeah,
yes. He
okay.
was,
Hmm.
so Nankana Sahib was his constituency, and it used to be quite large. Now they've, sort of made them smaller. But my father's, he was very, very busy. We hardly ever saw him.
Acha.
And, he would visit sometimes, and he was a very distant, sort of benevolent character who came, maybe took us
Mm-hmm.
out for ice cream or something. And gradually, I think as we grew up, even that sort of lessened, because probably he thought, they're grown up, they don't need these outings. But I think we missed him, but we just sort of knew that this is it. Uh, this is all we're going to see of him.
Hmm.
And every Eid, he would come and take us to, his brother's house, where we would spend the evening. Our whole day was spent with my maternal family.
Okay.
And when Abu Jan came, then we would go to see his brother who was in Lahore.
Hmm.
He was a very kind man, very, very kind, very dignified. He wrote a lot in Urdu and Punjabi, and he wrote poetry as well.
Hmm.
After his death, we found out that he was supporting so many literary organizations and magazines, and he never really spoke about it to us. But afterwards, we found out that he was, quite a patron to many artists and organizations.
Hmm.
My mother is like, I can talk about my mother all day long.
Hmm.
She was very special. I think she was ahead of her times, and she was a thoughted artist. She could write so well. I mean, the
Acha.
letters I have
Hmm.
that she had written to
Hmm.
my father, to some of my cousins, my cousins when they went abroad to America to study, she
Right.
would write them. And my cousins, even today, they talk about it. That, the letters would come and they would be like, some artistic sort of thing. And it's true. My mother was a fantastic storyteller, and she could make the most mundane incident into a story. So, I mean, she was very special. And this book that I've written, my forthcoming book,
Hmm.
I think I didn't realize it when I was writing it, but I think now, looking back, I think there's a lot of my mother in these characters that I've written. They're both mothers.
Okay.
And I think a lot of my mother is in those two women, Mira and Hasina. So, I mean, all mothers are special to their children.
True.
But I don't look at her just as a daughter.
Hmm.
I think I look at her as an individual, which is why I began to see that she was a thoughted artist.
Right.
And if she'd had the opportunity to write, I think she would have been a brilliant writer.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I remember your mother, and I think
Yeah.
I've said this to you before, right? She was just so warm, right?
Yeah.
She was so warm, she was so full of life, and I
Yeah.
mean, she had this really amazing smile every time you saw her. She would be
Yeah.
so welcoming. जब भी मैं visit
Yeah.
करती थी. And I'll always remember her like that, that
Yeah.
smile of hers.
And that's the way she was. I think she was so vivacious, and her presence was, she had a big presence. And it's I think hard to forget her. So even if it was, people had met her 2 or 3 times, they remember her.
Mm.
And she was a very positive person.
Yeah, yeah, that's how I remember her. Acha, and your siblings, let's talk about them.
So my siblings and I were very close, and we shared everything. And when we were children, we would be absolutely certain
Hmm.
that we were the March sisters.
Mm.
because my sister, your friend Shezra, she also loved books. And
Mm.
so for us, it was a bit of a competition because I wanted to be Joe, and she was absolutely sure she's Joe. So, the acting out and the plays that we would enact had to be. So I would end up being Beth.
Okay.
And I was not sure I quite quite fit. The image of Beth. She was so good,
Mm.
but I think it was a lovely uh, childhood, like free of a lot of the things that I see now around us. We were not worried about what we were wearing. It was just us and our imagination. And my mother, because she was herself a big reader,
Mm.
as was my father actually, but my mother is the one who made sure that
Mm.
we valued books and we read books and we had a lot of books in the house.
Mm.
So it was basically because of my mother, I think, that we developed this love of books and stories.
Mm.
Otherwise, I think our upbringing was both very traditional because, you finish your studies, get married, have children, so on and so forth.
Mm.
But also, I think the parallel education that we were getting was even at that time special
Mm.
because not a lot of people have read Urdu poetry the way that we have. This love for Urdu poetry
Mm.
is something that I have not seen in my contemporaries. It's something I think people much older than I, we connect over
Mm.
music, but not my generation.
Right.
I think maybe these are choices that you make later as well, but for me
Mm.
it was sort of the environment that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you think that your interest in Sufism then can be traced back to your grandma, right?
Oh, absolutely,
Mm.
yes, absolutely. In fact, when we were children, we grew up with the story that my grandmother's grandfather
Mm.
was a Sufi saint. And one of the miracles that has come down to us is that he had forbidden anyone to visit
Mm.
his quarters, which
Mm.
were separate from the main house.
Okay.
So he had a couple of rooms
Mm.
separate from the main house,
Okay.
and no one was supposed to come there.
Mm.
But early morning, one of his, domestic help, they went in and saw that he was there in pieces, like his head was separate and his torso was separate, his legs were separate, and he screamed bloody murder and he said that, someone has killed him.
Mm.
And when people came back, there he was sitting praying and he was very angry. And he said, "You were not supposed to come. This is not something that you were supposed to see."
Wow.
I mean, that's the
Yeah,
story that I
that
believe
has
it,
been
but
right. That's a story that's been passed on, right?
yeah, yeah, it has.
Wow. You
So,
think you
I mean,
think it's true?
I think it's true because I've seen the influence
Mm.
of, Sufism and Islam in my family. It's very, uh, very not, I wouldn't say orthodox or traditional, but it's definitely there and it's very spiritual.
Mm.
And this spiritual sort of connection is passed on through the
Mm.
generations.
Mm.
So even now, um, one of my khalas was very spiritual and she had these dreams, which, she would interpret and say, this is what it means. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that other people should believe me. I think
Huh.
spiritualism is something that runs in my family.
Okay. So do you
Yeah.
think that it was a bit of it was passed on to you as well?
I'm not sure because it's not something I can claim because
Hmm.
then I don't think it's real. I can I can see it in others,
Hmm.
but where I want to be
Hmm.
spiritually, I'm not there yet. And so I can't really say that, I have it.
Hmm.
Yes, I want to follow that path. Yes, I
Hmm.
want to
Hmm.
um, have that closeness with Allah.
Right.
but I'm not quite there yet.
Right. So with your great grandfather, then he must have been reciting some really special stuff, right? To
Yeah.
manifest in that way, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Uh,
But he wasn't allowed to share it, or
mm,
he didn't share it. It didn't come down to us, so we don't know what exactly his prayers were.
okay.
But he's, well
Hmm.
known. Yeah.
That is your interest then in
Maybe.
Sufism, right? All of
Yeah.
this.
Yes, all of this.
Yeah, because like an obvious question that comes to mind is if somebody doesn't know your background, they would be thinking कि ये क्यों लिख रही है about Sufism, right? Like an English language writer from Pakistan writing
Mm.
about Sufism, sometimes one tends to think, well, maybe they think that will be popular internationally or in the
Yeah.
West. But with you, it's deeper than that, right?
Yeah. I guess I never thought of it like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, because, I feel that anyone, even if I didn't have that background,
Hmm.
and I had a genuine interest in Sufism and I started studying it and
Hmm.
I wanted, that's perfectly okay. But
Hmm.
I never thought of it, like you're saying, yes, Sufism has become so, what's it, commercialized.
Commercialized,
And
yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
so yeah, I'm sure people can think like that. You're right.
uh. Well, so this is a good insight now we have,
Yeah.
into the mind of the writer, right, Faika?
Who never thought about the commercialization? I mean, it's such an obvious thing, but when you said it, I realized that, yeah, you're right. People can think that. But
Yeah.
my focus was just on the stories.
Mm-hmm. Acha, before we move on to your books and your writing, let's also talk a little bit about your sisters because your siblings, you grew up with them and I know how close all of you were, right? Let's start with the eldest, Shezra, right?
I think she is also a very spiritual person.
Mm-hmm.
She is very grounded. When my father passed away, everybody thought that one of the, excuse me, children, the three of us, one of us has to take it on.
Mm.
And Saira and myself, we just said, no, we're not going to.
Mm.
But Shazia said, no, I'm going to take up the mantle of my father because I don't want it to, just go to waste.
Right.
He spent 50 plus years, serving his constituency.
Mm.
And mashallah, she has done so well. She's worked so hard and just she's taken up not just the mantle of my father, but the place of my father for
Mm.
everyone there. And just like my father, she's working for the constituency, working for the people. No time for herself, because I think this is another thing that we've learned from my parents and my grandmother: the responsibility and the duty
Mm.
of whatever you take on, whether you take on the role of a wife and mother, whether you take on the role of an M&A, you have to do the best
Mm.
that you can. So we will not hold back in whatever role that we are given by Allah. So I think that's something that defines all three of us. And Aruj also, but because she's not here, I'm not. But as for 27 years, we saw that she too did the best that she could in whatever role. I mean, she was teaching in some school, and it was like, she was a rock star, the way the students and the teachers treated her.
Mm.
Because again, like my mother, she had a very big personality as well. And
Mm.
she was so funny. She had the loveliest sense of humor, and she could make you laugh no matter what. So I think that's something that Saira also took from my mother. Both of them, Saira and Aruj, had the best sense of humor, and they can really make you laugh. Shazra and I are more serious, but we still have a sense of humor and we can laugh at
Yeah.
ourselves as well as others.
Mm.
But don't expect us to tell you jokes because that just doesn't come to us naturally.
Well, that was a
So,
joke right there. With a
and
dark sense
you
of
saw
humor.
how flat it fell. That's me and Shazra. They're right there.
Acha. So, hierarchy mein, so it's she's the eldest, and
Yeah.
then it's
Saira.
Tyra, then
Then
it's
it's,
you.
yeah, then
And
it's me,
then
then
then Aruj, who
then
unfortunately passed away.
yes,
Uh,
Sarooj was the youngest.
she
Yeah.
was the youngest.
Mm.
And can we talk a little bit about how that affected you? Does that affect your writing as well?
I think actually, Sadia, when Aruj was diagnosed,
She had
I
cancer, right?
think, yeah,
Mhm.
she had cancer. She had some form of uterine cancer, leiomyosarcoma, I think it was called. And she was diagnosed when she was 23. And for the next 5 years,
Mm,
we were just in and out of the hospital,
mm,
my sisters and I.
right.
I think we were very protective of our parents, and we didn't expect them or even want them to, you know, um, sort of be a part of that daily grind. So it
Mm,
was just my sisters and I, and we would just, whoever could go would go. If somebody's busy, the other person would take on, and it was a very seamless kind of thing. And one of us was always there. Sometimes all three of
mm,
us were there, sometimes two of us were there, but we were constantly there. And I mean, we did the best we could. And I mean, she went in 2006 and it still came as a shock.
mm,
I mean, we'd been doing it for the last 5 years. We knew
mm,
she had cancer, but when she passed away, it changed us.
mm,
I think I still remember thinking that, how is everything the same when nothing is the same? And, how is it
yeah,
possible?
mm,
I'd lost my grandmother when I was 11, and that pain and that loss
mm,
I had felt before. But to lose a sister and to lose a younger sister, I think it changed all of us, including Shazra, because, she was the eldest.
right.
And for her, she was almost like, a child.
Mm,
Because, although the difference was 8 years between them,
mm,
but she always said that, I feel uh, that loss is too much. And I think all of us were affected. And I think one of the ways was that we sort of grew apart after that.
mm,
And I think we were all just dealing with our own loss
right.
in our own ways.
Mm,
And you cannot define the timeline of grieving.
mm,
So I think that timeline was also different. I think for me, it was ongoing, and we lost our mother 4 years later.
right. I'm so sorry.
And so that added to that wound, and it was ongoing,
Mm,
and we lost our father
mm,
in 2015.
yeah.
So I think for me, that grieving is, a constant. And I don't really want to add to that, but I think it's become a part of who I am, grieving. And I
Mm,
think this loss uh, of loved ones, I think it's in my blood now, and it's in my brain cells now, because I can't get away from it. It's not something I can just you know it's a part of me now.
mm,
So I think that is something that was really tested us. But
right.
Alhamdulillah, we never sort of forgot our bond, our sisterhood, and you know, we are still close.
Mm,
And I think we're getting closer as we age,
mm,
because we realize the importance that, sisters have for each other.
mm,
And perhaps also because this is not something that you find elsewhere. This togetherness, this
right.
sharing that we
Mm,
had, not just of your parents, your childhood, your experiences. but the loss.
Mm.
So it's something that we've worked on, and I think it's getting better. Alhamdulillah.
And were you closer to Aruj?
I was closest to Shazra. I was like a shadow.
Really?
So yeah, I
Okay.
would ask her everything. I would just if my mother hurt me, I would run to Shazra, and
Oh,
so it was like that. And
okay.
even now, if there's something that I'm confused, I give her a call and I'll say like, "This is the dilemma,"
Hmm.
and she'll always tell me, "No, no, do this," and then I just close my eyes and do that. I don't think about it. Then
Acha.
whatever she said,
Huh.
I'll do that.
And hopefully she's right most of the time, right?
I always think she's right. So
Okay. Tell us where you went to school. I know where you did, but for the audience, right? So
yeah,
school, then college.
I did my O levels from Convent of Jesus and Mary. And to date, I think there's no school better than convent. I mean, we had our issues with, the discipline. I think it served us well. I think it was a good, foundation to have.
Hmm.
So then I went to Kinnaird,
Hmm.
4 years at Kinnaird, intermediate and bachelor's. But I am a little ambivalent about Kinnaird. It was a
Okay.
lot of fun, but it
Hmm.
was also, I think, very restrictive in the sense that there was so much more that a college can offer.
Hmm.
But I think we can't blame Kinnaird because I think they didn't have enough funding. After my bachelor's, I got married, and then I did a master's in English literature privately. And after a few years, I applied for MPhil
Hmm.
in English literature from Government College.
Okay.
So I did MPhil in English literature from there, and I did a comparative study of Sufism with three novels of Jostein Gaarder. He's a Norwegian writer,
Hmm.
and I just loved his books, and especially the three books that I did my thesis on. I am absolutely certain that he has studied Sufism because it cannot be a coincidence that he
Hmm.
has exactly the same, the story within a story structure that
Hmm. Hmm.
Sufi stories have,
Hmm.
the idea of the fool as the wise man,
Hmm.
again something that Sufism has, like Mullah Nasruddin, you know,
Hmm.
always the fool and
Hmm.
giving wise lessons.
Hmm.
And the shifting of time that, when you read the novel, you have one perception,
Hmm.
and by the end, it has flipped. So that was Sophie's world. And we start the story with a certain character. And then
Okay.
by the end of the story, we realize that that character
Hmm.
is within a book that our main character is actually reading.
Hmm.
So yeah, so
Okay.
this shift in your
Hmm.
perception
Hmm.
is very uniquely a Sufi story technique.
Okay.
So that was very interesting. It was very difficult for me to convince a supervisor to let me do that
Hmm.
research,
Hmm.
but finally they agreed, and I think I learned a lot during that time because I was researching so much and I was reading, and
Hmm.
it all came together for me. I think that is the time when this idea of the Sufi storyteller was born, because it was such a powerful experience to know that this one person
Hmm.
can, from so far away, from perhaps 100 years ago or two, can change your mind here and now.
Hmm.
I mean, I think that's a very powerful thing to be able to do.
Hmm.
So I think that's something that I connected to, and I was reading a lot of Idris Shah's books. And he's a Sufi master. He's written a lot about Sufis and Sufism.
Hmm.
So then I was reading about Ibn al-Arabi, who is, one of the most fascinating Sufi saints, and he wrote so much, and he wrote about not only his own experiences,
Hmm.
but he philosophizes about the cosmos in relation to God, in relation to Sufism, and the interpretation that he gives is just so interesting. So what he says is that everything in the cosmos is a reflection of one of the names of Allah or many of the names of Allah combined. There is some sort of reflection there, whatever is created. So even in the planets or the stars that we see, they each, to each one, he gives a letter from Arabic, of course, because he was writing in
Right.
Arabic. So when you speak, whatever you are speaking, it goes all the way to the cosmos, resonates there, like the strings of a guitar, and then that echoes back to you. And that is the energy that you then release through your words. So, with Ibn Arabi's theory, that really resonates. I've never stopped researching Sufism, and I continue to read a lot on it. So, I think that is when this book was born, but I didn't quite have a plot and everything till, a few years back.
So you probably then enjoyed government college more so than Connect College, right?
But I enjoyed my MFA the most. So I went to Kingston University.
Okay.
So when my mother passed away, I just felt like, this is the beginning of the end. And if I don't do what I've always wanted to do now, then when am I going to do it?
Right.
So I was 36 years old when when I lost my mother, and I just sort of decided that I must go for the MFA because I was always very serious about my writing, but I had not taken any serious steps towards achieving that goal. So then I applied to a couple of universities. Kingston was my first choice. So because there was Elif Shafaq there was Hanif Qureshi, Rachel Cusk. So these were some big names there, and I wanted to go to Kingston. So it was a 2-year program, and I had a wonderful time there. I went there with my kids. I was doing everything on my own, making my decisions, and for the first time, I think I felt like I was doing what I was meant to do. And I remember when I went to my first class, it was a workshop where you're supposed to, submit your work and then they evaluate it, all of them together. And I told myself that if my peers, especially my teacher, my tutor, if they say that, they say things which tell me that no, I'm no good, I will not waste my money and I'll just wrap everything up and go home.
Okay.
But when the tutor came and the things that he said, I couldn't believe it's my work that he's talking about. And I told him, I said, this is my first ever workshop. I've never shared my work with anyone. You're the first professional person that I've shared it with. And he was surprised and he really liked my work. And Alhamdulillah, I got very good teachers who were all very encouraging. And that was, I think, a degree that I really enjoyed doing.
You did very well in that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Elif Shafaq was my thesis supervisor.
Okay.
So she's the one who gave me the, distinction, high distinction.
Wonderful.
And I got the best thesis award as well from Kingston.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And so your thesis, then you converted into your first book? Is
This,
that the way
yeah,
it happened?
this House of Clay and Water.
Hmm.
Yeah. So Penguin published it in 2017. I came back in 2014.
Okay.
And then I polished it and I edited it and then I started sending it out to agents and all. Alhamdulillah, it has done well.
It has.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it
yeah.
has.
And I still have to read it, and you still have to
Yeah,
send it to me. You promised you would.
yeah. Well, I might have
Signed.
news. Yeah, but I definitely, as soon as I have a copy, I'm going to send it to you.
Okay. Yeah.
It's out of print,
Yeah, I
sold
couldn't
out.
find
So,
it. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
exactly.
So maybe there'll be another print. Let's see how it goes.
So what's the cover? Do you have
Yeah,
it?
this is the penguin cover. I
Hmm.
love this cover.
It's very
This was,
nice.
yeah, this was designed by Halawat Ganjan, who is in with Penguin. I don't know if
Hmm.
he's still there. This is such a
It's
beautiful
yeah,
book
yeah, it is.
and beautiful cover.
Hmm.
And this is my forthcoming novel. This is also beautiful cover.
It is.
This is done by Neem Tree UK.
Hmm. When is it
This is
coming out?
coming out in March.
This
So
March. Okay. And
yes,
will it
this
be
March.
available in Pakistan as well?
Yeah, we're in talks. So they will probably be, but can't say yet.
The first one was available, right? In Pakistan. It was.
Yes, it was published by Liberty
Hmm.
Books in Pakistan.
Okay.
But it was sold out, and
Hmm.
after that they have not republished it. But again, we are in talks, but we haven't yet decided anything.
So let's talk about your books. All right. So let's talk about the first one. Tell us a little bit about it.
Essentially, this House of Clay and Water is a book about loneliness, about loss. Yes, there is a love story at the center,
Hmm.
because my protagonist falls in love with this Khaja Sirah, who spends his time sitting in the dargah of Data Sahib, and he spends his time there and is
Hmm.
considered a sort of kalandar.
Okay.
So this actually Kalandar was the original title of my book, but my tutor said that it's you should have an English title.
Hmm.
So then this verse by Rumi, came to mind. In this house of clay and water, my heart lies waste without you. I think it perfectly describes the book. There's a lot of feminism, there's a lot about the bigotry and the hypocrisy of our society, and
Hmm.
how narrow-minded and small-hearted we can be about accepting other people and their choices and the way they choose to live their lives.
Hmm.
So all of these things are there in the story, and it's a very simple story,
Hmm.
but it is also dealing with a lot of complex ideas.
Hmm. The idea, how did it strike you? Where did it come from?
I had been writing the chapters,
Hmm.
I think, since 2002 or 3, because I remember writing them when Aruj was in the hospital, and I
Hmm.
would take my notebook there because she'd be sleeping, and I would write over there. So I'd been writing it,
Hmm.
but I hadn't a complete manuscript. And the idea of Bhangi, the hermaphrodite, came to
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
Um, Actually, it was already there, which is why I was researching
Hmm.
on that topic, and I read um, Michael Foucault's book called Herculine Barbin. I realized the loneliness of such a person. It was,
Hmm.
I just couldn't get it out of my head. So I think that was what decided the
Hmm.
character.
And
Yeah.
how do you see your culture? Like, do you find that people they lack empathy? Does that reflect in your writing? Hmm.
There is a lot to admire in
Hmm.
our people,
Hmm.
but there is so much that is just so awful
Hmm.
and so against the idea of a Muslim. Because how can you be Muslim and not have empathy? Where
True.
we say that even a smile is a charity.
Hmm.
So if that is what our religion is teaching us, that a smile is charity,
Hmm.
empathy is definitely a huge part of it. I think the one thing that we are missing the most is kindness.
Hmm.
And the one thing that I feel is even more important than love is kindness. Because, it's just such a small thing that when somebody asks you, what am I looking like? And some people would, you just say you're looking nice. What does it matter to you? Just say, you know. So I am a firm believer
Huh.
of don't open your mouth if you don't have anything nice to say. I've given a very, mundane example, but there are people who want that little bit of confidence from you. Maybe you are the person they need their validation from.
Hmm.
Don't withhold that validation. Give it.
Well
That
put.
is kindness.
Hmm. But that's not generally our culture, right?
I mean,
It's
our
it's
culture is
not.
basically
Uh,
that if you have power over someone, and for example, that validation that I'm talking about,
mm,
just hold on to it for dear life.
mm, mm,
Don't give it.
mm.
And I think it goes against uh, Islam. It goes
Absolutely.
against our practice. It goes against, I think, human nature.
Generally over here, people don't think. And if you don't think, then, how do you really separate yourself from animals?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm curious as to how people would react to your book and to this kind of a love story, which is even beyond their understanding of forbidden love. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I think a lot of there is a very very limited readership in Pakistan,
Hmm.
and even those people who read, I think they read books, novels in English with this sort of idea
Hmm.
that it's not about us or it's not about our country, or they'll start talking about the image of Pakistan and how writers in English are destroying the image of Pakistan,
Hmm.
which is, I find this such a ridiculous thing. I mean, the image of Pakistan is not in the hands of a few people writing in English,
True.
it's every person
Hmm.
who goes and cheats abroad, every person who tries to smuggle things, and they are caught, and those are the people destroying the image of
Hmm.
Pakistan.
Hmm.
So I doubt, if anything, if I could make the image of Pakistan through my writing, I would do that. But it's not possible.
Hmm.
One person cannot make or break the image of Pakistan. One story is not going to make or break the image of Pakistan.
Hmm.
It is the choices we make constantly over the years that makes an image of Pakistan.
Look, and
So
it's always good to be critical. I mean, if you're not critical, if you don't analyze things, then how will things get better? फिर तो उसी
I
तरह
have to write
continue
what I
करेंगे.
see. Yeah,
Exactly, yeah. You can't just make up things and, be a PR agent. You're a writer.
yeah, exactly.
It has to come
Exactly.
from within you. Acha, so
Yeah.
I find this really interesting, and now you must really somehow
Give you a
get that
copy.
book to me, yeah, which I
Yes,
haven't read so far, and I really wanted to, because as you
inshallah.
said, यहाँ पे लोग तो read नहीं करते ज़्यादा, and maybe we started reading very early on, and we have very few Pakistani English language writers, right, who can
Yeah.
write well and choose bold and interesting topics. Ever since I came back after a very long time to Lahore, and there's this hype about everybody's talking about transgender people. They don't understand what that means. They don't understand that there's a scientific biological explanation. And, there's treatment available, that,
Yeah.
it's a medical condition. So it's like amazing to go through this whole
Yeah.
slew of illiterate people. And,
That's true.
so yeah, so it's I think it's a very interesting topic that
Yeah.
you picked up, which is
Hmm.
kudos to you. अच्छा,
Thank
अब
you.
मुझे ये बताओ कि जो नई book आ रही, what's that about? Show us the
So,
book again.
Baba,
Hmm,
it's the Sufi Storyteller.
okay.
So, as the title says, it is about a storyteller. I have read, these murder mysteries, but my favorite has always been Agatha Christie.
Hmm,
So, because, she was so logical,
hmm,
and everything was very simple
hmm,
and there. And, so I don't know how I had been thinking about this,
hmm,
but I'd been thinking about murder by story.
okay.
So, a murder
Hmm,
which is based on a story, or the solution is in the story.
hmm,
And I'd be thinking about it, I think, for some time, just didn't know how to put it all together. And then one day, it all came together, and I started writing this. For me, every novel that I've written, it begins when I know the character, the main person whose story it is. If I'm clear about them, if I hear them,
hmm,
then I start writing. So when I heard the voice of the storyteller,
hmm,
I just stopped. started following, and I started writing whatever it was coming. And then, it's a long process. Writing a novel is a very long process. So the first year for me was just listening to that voice and writing. And once I had that, other bits and pieces, start falling into place. And then I had more of the plot. And once the plot is there, then you've got the whole thing. And then I edit like crazy. I edit my book so much because I want it to be the best that it can be.
Mm.
So I edit it for a whole year,
Okay.
and I don't let anyone see it until I know that, okay, now it's good enough for other people to read. And of
Mm.
course, even then, there's a lot of editing to be done and a lot of polishing. So it's a long process, and I think even if I were to start editing it now,
Mm.
even though it's ready, and I would find things to edit and I would find things to delete or add, because for me that universe is still there,
Mm.
and I can add to it, I can take away from it. But hopefully, people will like it the way it is now, which is, it's going to be there in March, inshallah. The story begins with Leila, who is a professor and a storyteller,
Mm.
and she is looking for her mother who
Mm.
abandoned her as a child.
Okay.
And that's the way that it begins. And there's this woman she thinks might be her mother, but she's not sure.
Mm.
And then a murder happens, and then the both of them have to get together and solve the murder. So there is a stream, perhaps, which is about the relationship of a mother and a daughter, and it's a very complex relationship.
Mm.
It's a relationship that disappoints, that inspires, that is painful.
Mm.
So, like I was saying earlier, that only when I talk about the book now,
Mm.
I realize that there's a lot of my mother in those characters,
Right.
and this complexity and this almost obsessive love is something that I think I had with my mother, and I think she had with hers as well. I think my mother was, because she was the sole caretaker of my grandmother, they had a very close relationship.
Mm.
And my grandmother wouldn't let her out of her sight. So one of us would sit with my grandmother when
Mm.
my mother had to go to the loo. So even those 5 minutes, she was like, "Where has she gone?" And we'd be there. So I think mothers who are, I think, I don't know, complex or intelligent, or they have a big personality. They have that effect on their daughters.
Mm.
I've seen mothers and daughters. They have these simple relationships. When they talk about their clothes and they're borrowing each other's clothes, and my mother was like so proper, and she would be like, no question of borrowing anything from anyone. You wear what you have
Mm.
and be proud. And she expected big things from us. So when we got married to each of us, she said, "Do not make your marriage or your children a handicap.
Mm.
Your life does not end here. You have to continue studying, continue searching for something for you." I mean, most mothers don't say that.
Mm.
They would just say, just focus on the kids, focus on your marriage. And
Right.
she wanted more.
Mm.
Not just that. I mean, she didn't say that neglect your family, your children, but it was like, yes, that's there,
Mm.
but do more, be
Mm.
more.
Mm.
So I think that was this kind of. I always say this in every interview. I say this because I still find this very annoying and also very. I don't know. It's inspiring, I guess, because she would wake us up
Mm.
with Allama Iqbal's poetry. If you're familiar with Allama Iqbal's,
Yeah.
there is this poem, उठो मेरी दुनिया के गरीबों को जगा दो काखे उमरा के दरो दीवार हिला दो. And you know what that is? That's like wake up and shake the world.
Yeah.
Wake up and bring about a revolution.
Mm. Mm.
So that is what she expected from us.
Mm.
So, I mean, I think she was extraordinary, and perhaps she didn't get the chance to shine herself,
Mm.
and she wanted. I mean, it was a limited sort of a circumscribed life that she had.
Hmm.
Which, and in that, of course, she was, she was the mehfil ki jaan, and she was the, the one who was making everyone laugh. And
Hmm.
but she had a very big light to shine, and the world didn't get to see it. I think
Hmm. Hmm.
she would have been an amazing writer, I feel, if she'd got the chance. So a lot of my mother in that.
Well, you're carrying the torch now, right? So,
Yeah,
so now you're the
I do.
writer. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but with mothers, you never know. I always think, would she be proud, or would she be like, no, this isn't enough. You're not doing enough, or this isn't good
No,
enough.
no, no, no. She
So
she
you
would be
never know.
proud. No, no, no. She would be proud.
Uh,
And maybe sometimes mothers don't say जो उनके दिल में
yeah.
होता है और इसीलिए मैं
Mm,
हमेशा encourage करती हूँ कि कहना चाहिए so
yeah.
that your kids can later on think about it and
Yeah.
know for a fact that my mother would be proud, but she would be. ठीक है.
Yeah.
Once this book comes out, have you already started thinking about the next one or?
I don't want to say too much because I don't know if it's going to happen or not.
Hmm.
But I am writing another one, and there's another one in the pipeline. Something that I haven't started,
Hmm.
but I know what it's going to be. And once I finish writing the one that I'm writing these days, then inshallah I'll start the next one.
Wonderful. So when did you start writing? What was the first thing you ever wrote?
I don't even remember. It must have been, when I was in grade seven, 6 or 7. I started writing for the newspaper. So I mean, I would just write short stories and I would send them, and
Hmm.
they would get published. I think the first thing I wrote that got published was about a Kashmiri soldier who, he's just writing about his experience and his, I think, how he dies. And it was in first person. And
Hmm.
the first criticism I got, the first critique was from my Khalu, and he said, how is he writing this story if he's dead? I remember.
And I remember
Yeah.
that you guys used to speak a lot of Punjabi at home.
Yes,
So
yes.
you are very fluent in that, and you've also published in
Yeah,
Punjabi, right? So, and
yeah.
anything else coming out in Punjabi, or is it mostly English now?
Um, so the thing is that I attempted writing in
Hmm.
Urdu as well,
Okay.
but I like, as I already told you, I like to do things, to the best of my ability.
Hmm.
And neither in Urdu nor in Punjabi do I have that command over the literary language
Right.
of
Hmm.
Punjabi, or the literary language of Urdu. So I
Hmm.
don't want to just write a mediocre thing, which
Hmm.
is why I didn't. In Punjabi, the reason that I'm still writing is because my father has worked so much for that language,
Hmm.
and he would promote that language so much. I felt that if I can carry that on, I should. So there are some people working for it. So I contacted them and I said, I told them about my father. They knew him and they said,
Hmm.
okay, you just write something. And if somebody who writes in English writes in Punjabi, it'll be good for the magazine.
Hmm.
Which I don't know what that meant, but I wrote something, and again, it's at a very um, basic level,
Hmm.
but I enjoy writing it. So I continue to send them, an essay or two. I haven't been able to write fiction in that language
Hmm.
yet,
Hmm.
but I write personal essays, and you know, that's what I'm doing.
Okay. Lovely.
Yeah.
It was so lovely talking with you. I'm
Thank
really
you.
looking forward to your books and to reading them. And please do
Inshallah.
continue.
I will.
We
And
need good writers. We need people who can think. We need visionaries in
yeah.
Pakistan, don't we?
Yeah, inshallah, and I hope we get many, many more. So,
Inshallah.
thank you
All right.
so much for having me. It was great talking to you, seeing
Same
you after
here.
so long. And it didn't feel like an interview at all. It was just like, I was talking to a friend. But
Thank you, my dear. Take care of yourself. Allah Hafiz.
you too. Allah Hafiz.